Hello, this is Megan Brown with the National Park Service. I am Chief of the State Tribal Local Plans and Grants Division, and we are the part of the Park Service that manages the Historic Preservation Fund and the grant programs that come from it. This PowerPoint and webinar are going to explain a little bit of the types of things we look for in a grant application to apply for our federal funding. So this is from the federal perspective, and hopefully you will find a little insight into what we're looking for and make sure that you have a successful grant application. So the basic items that we're going to go over are understanding what grant programs can and cannot fund, completing the application itself and some tips for that, and then moving through the federal regulations after you receive a grant. These are all important elements of the grant process. So first, understanding what grant and grant programs can and cannot fund. Federal agencies have many different types of funding mechanisms that fund many different things. So it's very important to make sure that your project is the right fit, matching it to the correct program. We don't want to just see a shotgun approach that you apply for absolutely everything. So you need to make sure that your project is eligible to apply, that you as the entity is eligible to apply, that you meet threshold criteria. Those are the things you have to definitely have in place or you won't be considered for the grant. If you're unsure, you need to ask the grant staff. That's what the staff is there for. That's what the information on the website and in the notice of funding opportunities are for. So please make sure you read those and make sure you're clear. Look at examples of previously funded projects. Understand why they were successful. Find one that's similar to your project to review. Making sure that your project is the next logical step. So if a reviewer is looking at it, for our case in the preservation of historic buildings, making sure that you're not trying to refinish the floor before repairing a hole in the roof that rain is leaking through. And has the necessary pre-planning taken place? Are you ready for this federal grant? Often, probably the largest grant your organization will ever manage. Make sure that you're prepared. So next, completing the application. It's super important to start early. Grant applications take a lot of time and energy, and often there are outside systems that require you to sign up for, register in, so you really cannot start something like this the week before. So give yourself plenty of time, read the entire application and the guidelines thoroughly. Don't assume knowledge if you're too close to the project. So get somebody that maybe isn't as familiar to help you with that, and get that outside person to review your work once you've completed it. Be complete and concise. Put yourself in the reviewer's shoes. Oftentimes our programs get from 300 to 150 applications, and it is an arduous task to go through and review all of those. So make sure that you're following the directions and telling us the story, but in a complete and concise way. The application should stand alone and not depend on supplemental information. It's really important that that application says what you want it to. Follow the format of the application. Don't make up something else. Don't attach your own set of forms. It is important to follow those rules of the application, as that is how we process them and give everyone a fair and equal review. Answer each question. They ask for different information, so make sure you're not repeating yourself or just cut and pasting from a previous question. Sometimes maybe start with the last question first. We often see in applications the first question's answered in immense detail, but the last question, you've kind of gotten tired and it's not answered as well. So think about that. And make sure that you address the need or the threat or the purpose of the project clearly. We want to know what you want to do with our funding, and we should be able to get that very easily out of your application. Understand the funding requirements. Only include eligible expenses. Don't include things that we cannot pay for. Know what can and cannot be used for match if that is something that's required. Sometimes match is required and it always has to meet the same rules as the federal funding. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it may not be required but might be a competitive factor. So be careful when outlining match and know that if it has to be in cash only, if it can be in-kind donations, and how you would need to track that. Demonstrating that the match is in place or there's a clear plan for raising it that makes sense is also important. And again, knowing if you need to have the match in place at the time of application or you can continue to raise it after receiving the grant is an important thing to know. Repeat applicants. Often our grant programs are highly competitive. We often say third time's the charm. If you do intend to repeat and apply again, ask for the reviewer's comments on previous applications. People spend a lot of time investing in the review of these applications and are instructed to provide you with recommendations and explanations for their scores. So it's important to find out about that. And then if you do apply, rewrite the application based on the comments. We do know when you've applied again, we remember. And to see an application that's either on last year's form and hasn't been touched or hasn't been rewritten at all does not bode well for receiving a grant again. Ask, even if you're successful, you can always learn something from the comments and the time that these expert reviewers have put into looking over your application. Supplemental information to the application. It should enhance the application but not take the place of it. So imagine if all your supplemental information fell away and all that was there was the application, would it explain your project? And that's what you need to make sure it does. Letters of support, they vary by program. Some programs want to see them. You definitely want to see a letter of support or a letter of partnership if you have an organization that might be contributing match or contributing staff or volunteer time. Those are important. However, sending in just multitudes of kind of form letters of support is probably not the most productive use of your time. So definitely spend your time on your application and then supplement with letters of support. Be careful to pay attention to who those letters of support go to. With several of our programs, if they are addressed to someone higher than the program chief, it requires a very a complicated process of congressional response for us and makes a lot of work for the grant program. So do kind of pay attention to those things and make sure they're useful. If the program requires a letter of resolution or upper level approval, maybe city council approval or tribal resolution, make sure that you have those and that you've given yourself enough time to secure those before the deadline. Photos are an important part of a lot of applications, and they should really tell the story. If there's a threat to the property or the building, show it. Show a picture of the water pouring in the roof or the leaking gutters or the mold growing or those types of things. They should support the reason that you're asking for the funding and what you want to do with it. If you do send photos, please be clear as to what they are so we know what we're looking at and include good captions. Also, photo credit, who the photo came from, and the date it was taken is important. Okay, our third topic, moving through federal regulation. So this is something you need to be familiar with before you apply for the grant because you need to know what is going to be required of you. The OMB circulars are an important place to look, so you need to be familiar with them. This is what provides the overall rules for all federal funding, no matter what federal agency you are receiving funding from. And 2 CFR 200 is going to be the important place for you to look and learn about. And remember that matching funds must also follow the same rules as federal funds if they're included as part of the project. A lot of times there are what we call federal hoops. Some people might call it red tape, but these are things that will always be a part of a federal award. And that's competitive selection, be if it's consultants, contractors, equipment, supplies, review and approvals, making sure you're sending your information in before you do the work. Send it in early, get input. And a lot of these approvals are required before you can receive reimbursement. Um, all the requirements of the grant. So what is the reporting requirement? Is it 6 months, quarterly, annually? Do you need to put up a project sign? Do you need to put notice on your website of the funding? Photos, what kind of quality do we want? Can we take digital? Restrictions, is there an easement to be placed on the property after you receive the funding? What are the audit requirements and what are the time limits? And can you request an extension if you need one? These are all important things to have an understanding of. So that kind of covers our three main topics, but just as a reminder that good grantees might get funded again, and this often happens. We see this quite a bit. So keeping a close relationship with your grant manager, keeping them informed, responding to them quickly when they ask a question, those are all important things. Complete your reporting on time. Request extensions in advance and know your deadlines and what's required. And always have a backup for your project manager. That's really important. Often a project manager may leave. We've had cases where they've even passed away. And if only one person in your organization knows what's going on, then it can be difficult to kind of finish off the grant or get it moving again, that type of thing. And here's where you can find additional information, at least on our programs here in the state, Tribal Local Plans and Grants Division. Visit www.mps.gov/steelpig. For application assistance, you can contact our main email, preservation_grants at preservation_grants_info@mps.gov, and our mainline phone number. Also, we have a agreement with the American Architecture Foundation to assist us with providing grant application support. So speaking with Tom Minner at arcfoundation.org might be a good place to start. And if you ever have questions about grants.gov, they do have a 24-hour service line, and their email is listed here. They also have a lot of recorded webinars. Grants.gov is managed by grants.gov, not by the federal agencies. So it is important that if you have questions concerning that, registering for it, again, it's a process to start early on. It's important to go to them, as the federal agency doesn't have any control over that. I hope this webinar has been helpful and that it will encourage you to look around and apply for a federal grant that might assist your organization. Keep in mind that we're here to help and that anyone can write a grant application. Thank you.